So, all we have to do now is sail to Turfin, confront the Guardian, and defeat him.
Oh, is that all?
It won't be easy, but we can do it.
There won't be any we, Raven. I'll be going alone.
But...
No buts. I'm not saying this just to protect you. This is preordained. I'm not just going in there to defeat another enemy. I'm finishing something that started a long time ago. I'm finishing something that's more important than two people.
Can't I at least sail to Turfin with you? Can't you at least give me that?
Yes, of course. This might be our last chance to be alone together. I wouldn't miss that for the world.
Let's get underway then. Where would you like to go?
Turfin.
Before you run off, I need to tell you something about Turfin.
Are you still telling me where I need to go next?
Shut up and listen to me. There's a secret entrance into Turfin that will get you past most of the Wormguard. It's up on the northern part of the island, behind the Dragon's Den. If you can stay clear of the dragons, this entrance will be much safer. Well, I guess this is it. I can't tell you how much you mean to me or what our time together has meant, so I won't try. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming into my life, and thank you for what you've done here. You're my life and my love, Avatar. I won't forget you.
Raven,
No, please don't say it. If you start talking, then I'm gonna break down and cry, and I don't want to do that. Please, just smile, tell me that you love me, and then leave.
I love you.
I love you too. Goodbye.
That. Who's that? Who's there? Who are you? Are you one of them?
It's all right. I'm the Avatar, and I'm here to help.
The hero? Oh, Avatar, please help me. They did horrible things to me. Please do as I ask, please.
What do you need?
I want you to kill me. Please put me out of my misery, Avatar. They gave me a poison that will kill me. I'm in so much pain. I pass out. When I do, those gargoyle faces are there again, beating me, clawing me. Oh, please. Make it all go away. Please, kill me. Release me from all this pain. I want to go home.
Are you sure you want me to do this?
Yes, the pain and the nightmares are unbearable. Oh, please just release me, please.
Blackthorn? I knew you'd come back, you dirty, backstabbing lout.
So, are you another treasure hunter? No. By the looks of you, my guess is that you're a big, strong hero who's just down here to kill monsters.
Who are you?
No, you go first. Tell me your name, and I'll tell you mine.
I am the Avatar.
The Avatar, eh? I guess I was right about you being a hero. My name is Ciara, and it's very nice to meet you, Avatar.
What are you doing down here?
I'm looking for treasure. I know it's dangerous and all, but I've heard tell of a room in this place that's loaded with gold and gems. I would only need a little of that and I'd be set for life. Say, you wouldn't mind helping a lady out just a little bit, would you?
How can I help you?
Well, it's like this. I've been down here for an ogre's age looking for a treasure room. So far, all that I've found is a strange red cube. I think that I found the room that the treasure is in, but the door is locked and I haven't been able to find the key.
Tell me about the cube that you found.
It's not much, really, but I've never seen anything like it. I figure, if I can't find the treasure room, I might be able to use this cube for something.
Yes, that is odd.
Tell you what, though, handsome. You get me the key to that treasure room, and I'll give you this cube.
I'll try to look for the key.
Thank you very much. I promise that I'll give you a nice reward if you can bring me that key. Goodbye now. Did you find the key to the treasure room?
Yes, I have the key.
Then hand it over. A deal's a deal. Here's your cube. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to the treasure room.
Magus, speak now the magic words of life.
I brought you here to finish you off, Guardian.
You still haven't learned, have you? Anything that you do to me happens to you as well. You and I are one. We're connected. The only difference is that you are weak and you care. I will dominate because I don't care. All of Britannia and anything else that I choose will be mine to use and destroy as I see fit.
Right now, even as we speak, your columns are being cleansed. They're being turned so they nurture the virtues rather than corrupt them.
That means nothing. Your friends are too late. This is all too late. It is impossible to defeat me now.
Too late, you say? The moons didn't collide. Their orbits are no longer decaying. Face it, Guardian. Everything that you set in motion, we have reversed.
No! That's impossible. Your friends have only temporarily forestalled their fate. Once you are mine, my power will be limitless and I will destroy this world.
Magus, speak the magic words of Armageddon.